All right, this is Patrick Rogers, and today we have the privilege to have Troy Helming on the show. And Troy is the founder and CEO of Earthgrid. Welcome to the show, Troy.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Awesome, man. So Troy Helming is a unicorn founder. He has 6 company exits under his belt and a modern day industrialist. He's an inventor, has 60 patent claims, an elite athlete, an author, 1 book plus hundreds of articles, and a clean energy executive. He's founded companies that have generated more than 30 billion of economic impact, which is phenomenal. And he serves on numerous boards, longtime wellness practitioner and yogi. So again, Troy, great to have you on the show. Before we dive into Earthgrid and your journey, what's one interesting fact about yourself that not many people know?
Well, I guess the one I would go with first is the fact that my biological age is about 10 years younger than my chronological age.
Nice.
I practice anti-aging and wellness stuff. Been doing that for nearly 30 years.
Really? For 30 years?
Yeah. Well, since 1991. So I guess, yeah, more than that now.
So how do you measure, is there like anything that you're like, how do you tangibly measure your biological age versus chronological?
Yeah, there's kits out there that you can order online, kind of like DNA kits. Company that I like the most, I've done a few of them, but Elysium, they sell anti-aging supplements, and they have a kit called Index. I forget what it costs, $100 or something. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, they test the length of the telomeres and mitochondria function and things like that, and they've gotten increasingly more accurate over time. And it's surprisingly, surprisingly accurate with respect to being able to predict someone's onset of age-related illness, like cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and things like that.
Wow. I didn't know something like this existed. Being an engineering mind, that sounds like a great thing to be able to have. So, okay, so you're actually able to test your biological age versus chronological age, and you're taking a lot of anti-aging supplements, but you're also like super athletic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't always that way, but about, 5.5 years ago, my son got me into the NBC hit show American Ninja Warrior, and we binge watched it.
This is insane.
And so I got kind of excited about it, and I realized, hey, there's ninja gym, so I'm going to go try this out, because I was a gymnast in college, and as you mentioned, a yogi for a long time, but I had a Dad-Bod, was pretty out of shape, and could only do 1 pull-up with good form when I started. And anyway, so I went to a ninja gym, promptly threw out my back and injured my shoulder. But it made me mad. I'm so competitive that I was like, nope, this is not going to happen. I'm going to keep at it. So I kept going back, and eventually got to where I was pretty good, and then built a ninja gym in my backyard, and then moved that to a big building. And now I'm part owner of the largest Ninja Warrior gym in the country, which is here in Richmond, California. But I've been invited to compete on the show 4 times.
That is insane, man. And this was 5 years ago?
Correct. Yeah.
So, okay. So 5 years ago, you're just like, your son's like, hey, check out this show. Let's watch it. You watch it, and you just like got obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Started going,
built
shape. Your own gym in the backyard. Oh yeah. Look at this guy. Nice. You got your own, now you part owner of the one of the biggest Ninja Warrior gyms, and you've been on the show 4 times.
That's right. Well, I've been invited 4 times. One year there was COVID, and they canceled it for all but a few of them. But anyway, yeah, I have been on the show.
Dude, in 5 years, that's freaking crazy.
Yeah, it was not easy the first probably 2 years. Fortunately, I had a bit of a lull. I had an exit with one of my companies, so I had more time to put into it. Maintaining the fitness I have takes a lot less time than getting there, and it took a lot of work to get there. So
I believe that. Yeah. I was watching something last week. Have you ever heard of something called the NMN pill?
I have, yeah. That's actually Elysium sells a supplement with NMM and NAD plus. Yeah, I follow Dr. David Sinclair and Andrew Huberman and a few others that have podcasts and so forth. Follow them on Twitter, and yeah, NMN is fabulous. I've been taking that now for probably 3 years, and NAD for about 4 years, if I remember correctly.
Okay, cool. I just started NMN last week, and I've heard great things about us too. Of course, did a ton of research, but it's good to hear that you being in this, you've been taking it for a while now, and they're feeling the effects. Awesome. Well, cool, man. So that's pretty awesome right there. I think we get to do the whole show just talking about that. But this is High Performance CEO. So all right, let's dive into the business a little bit. So tell us about Earthgrid, man. What are you up to?
Yeah, so about, let's see, 7 years ago in 2016, I had a solar company at the time, and often we would have to abandon our solar projects or downsize them because after trying to get and these are utility scale solar. We don't do rooftop or residential, anything like that. We do the big solar farms. Anyway, and we had to downsize a project by 75% because the grid couldn't handle it. And this happens all the time. In fact, roughly 80% of all proposed solar and wind projects are abandoned because our grid is so antiquated. And anyway, this particular one, had we been able to go underneath 3 kilometers of wetlands and creeks, 2 miles, 3 kilometers, we would have been able to get to a beefier part of the grid. But the cost to do that was so high that killed the economics of it, and going overhead, getting a permit to go over all that stuff would have taken years and was risky. So anyway, we downsized it. We're having a drink, a happy hour, drowning our tears over beers. And one of my solar engineers, he's a former Navy SEAL, was bragging to his girlfriend about how his SEAL team used to practice entering enemy ships by going underwater and cutting through the side of the ship with a plasma cutting torch. And he was like, yeah, that thing, take your arm off, 20,000 degrees, and plate falls in, water rushes in, they go in, pow, pow, pow. We're all like, dude, you're such a badass, right? Anyway, middle of the night, I wake up, I'm like, plasma, that's hot enough to melt rock, right? Researching, yeah, it's hot enough to vaporize it. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? We could repurpose plasma to put power lines underground faster and hopefully cheaper. And so anyway, that was the genesis of the idea, the origin story. And so fast forward to today, Earthgrid has developed and built our MVP, our minimum viable product. It's a plasma trenching system. We have, actually, it's up to, I think, 70 something patent claims that we have that are either published or pending. Most of them are published globally, except everywhere but China. But yeah, we plan to build an underground super grid across North America and eventually across the world using our plasma tunneling and trenching machines. We'll have power, fiber, water, and e-commerce delivery tubes inside our tunnels, and we will own and operate the projects and lease space to our utility customers.
Wow, that's a lot. So e-commerce delivery space, in addition to all the utilities and everything you're going to run, you're going to have an actual this e-commerce thing. How big of a tunnel will that be? Is that going to have some kind of a system with like a conveyor belt, or how will that work?
Yeah, so this is you're gonna love this, Patrick. This is so cool. So you can check out, and your listeners can check out a couple of companies that we're working with. One of them is called Pipe Dream Labs, and the other one is Magway out of the UK. And so Pipe Dream, for instance, uses tubes and robots that go through these tubes at up to 100 kilometers per hour, 60 miles an hour, and they can go horizontally and vertically. And our tunnels, Earthgrid's tunnels, are going to be pretty big, 2.5 meters in diameter. That's 8 feet. I prefer metrics. We're the only country on the planet that still uses the British feet, pounds, and all that. Yeah. Anyway, but
for engineers.
Yeah, for us engineers, we appreciate it. So yeah. And way easier to do the math. I mean, what's 1 and 5/8 inches plus 2 and 7/16 inches, right? Yeah. Who wants to do fractions? Anyway, yeah. So imagine having an Amazon locker at the end of your street where you can order something on Amazon and Whole Foods, and it arrives in minutes in the locker at the end of your street. Eventually, we want to connect every home. That'll take a long time, obviously. But yeah, so that's where we're starting. And so that's the idea. And then Magway is a slightly bigger system for heavier weight type of stuff that would be moving through the tunnels.
So is this kind of your main project then? Is these underground tunnels connecting the US?
That's right. Yeah. In fact, we just signed a binding term sheet for
Uh-huh.
a huge amount of capital to build a network of tunnels, starting with the transmission grid, solving that, and then adding
Right.
more fiber because only 40% of Americans have access to decent, hardline physical broadband. A lot of folks have to use, wireless or
Starlink, like me.
Starlink. Exactly. Yeah.
We were just right before the show. It seemed like we had a little bit of a bad connection, so I was like, it's probably me on Starlink. Um, Man, so okay, so I didn't get all this from our pre-call. This is pretty amazing. So what like how far down do you have to drill this, and do you need to get like permission, or do you have to buy the land? How's that all work?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with the permission. So over the last several years, Earthgrid has spent quite a bit of time and money and legal fees to become a utility. We are an approved regulated utility in 26 states in the US, representing about 73% of the US population. By the end of the year, we should be up to 40 states,
Wow.
roughly 90%. So, and eventually all of them. So that's the first part, and that's a big deal. Each one of those utility approvals is worth
It's
millions if we were to
a
license
lengthy
them.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, that gives us the access to public rights of way. So we can put our tunnels or trenches alongside or underneath any public roadway, and there's a process for that, of course, but it gives us an accelerated preferred right for that. That's not guaranteed, but close to it.
Wow.
So that's the first part. And then your question about how deep and so forth. Typically, we're going to be somewhere between 3 to 5 meters below the surface. And that would be below the spaghetti of other utility infrastructure that is mostly in soil. We don't mind hard rock. We can vaporize rock really fast and cheap. So our tunneling, we do tunnels and trenches, but imagine for our tunneling, imagine a little tractor, like a riding lawnmower sized tractor, a little bigger than that, with 10 lightsabers on the front, vaporizing
Right.
all the rock and soil, and a Mandalorian jetpack on the back, blowing out all the little bits of rock and dust.
Yeah, yeah. Something almost like out of the movies kind of thing.
It's
Um
cool.
it sounds like it. So this thing's down there, which is 9 to 15 meters, something like that, under the ground. Is there any like how is that? Is that there's no chances of that caving in? Do you have to like put supports in as you go? And I apologize. I'm just so freaking curious, man.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, 9 to 15 feet or so below. So yeah, we'll be lining all of our tunnels. First of all, if you're in soil, you have to line the tunnel with something much stronger, right? Because you can
Right.
have ground settling. But usually the rule of thumb is if you're 2.5 meters, or excuse me, 2.5 times the diameter of the tunnel beneath the surface, there isn't going to be any settling even if you don't line it. But we will always line our tunnels with shotcrete. So just like someone would spray shotcrete on their pool, the walls of the pool, we'll
Same
do the
thing.
same thing with our tunnel. We have a shotcrete spraying wand on the back of the tractor that sprays it.
So are you doing this one big tunnel now that it will be able to carry transmission and big enough for the e-commerce down the road?
Yeah,
Or are you going to
exactly.
come back and drill again? No, okay. You're just going to do one big tunnel and go.
That's the plan. I mean, we're starting with trenches
Wow.
because that's the machine we built, and like
Yeah.
a bunch of utilities we're working with around the country, they need tunnels, but they need trenches even more. Because like the soil layer is fairly thin, right? And then it gets into
Yeah.
rock, whether it's limestone or
Very
granite
cool.
or whatever.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and a lot of them are struggling to get through 3 meters a day. That's 10 feet a day because they have to use jackhammers. That's like the most
Right.
they can do. Yeah, and we can go anywhere from 6 to 20 times faster than that, and at about half the cost.
So this is a pretty, I mean, well, this is another disruptive technology, a disruptive event. What's your plan for like you got to eat elephant one bite at a time, right? Is there a certain
Right.
like expansion plan, like, hey, we're starting here and then we're going to connect this states first, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. We have initial projects in Northern California where, a lot of the fires are being caused by power lines that are getting hit with weakened trees or whatever in windstorms in
Interesting.
really dry areas. So Yeah, like PG&E, for instance, they announced plans to bury 10,000 miles of their power lines. That's only 10% of their lines, but it's the ones in the most fire prone regions. So other utilities have similar initiatives, and so that's where we're starting. And then we also have some projects or customers like in Texas where they have a solar farm, and it can take 3 to 4 years to get the connection through the grid to their customer, which might be like a data center or a factory or something like that.
Right, right.
And we can speed that up by, well, we can do it in a few months rather than a few years.
That's fantastic. Wow. Yeah, very cool, man. So take us through a little bit of your journey, and how have you been able to get to where you're at, and what's kind of your secret to success, man, as a CEO?
Well, so a few things. Number one, being physically fit, I have found helps me a lot. So I've actually accomplished so much more in the last 5 years compared to the rest of my career because I have the energy. I don't hardly
Love it,
ever
man.
set an alarm. Yeah, I wake up when my body is done. I get, a solid 7.5 hours of sleep every night. I think that's critical. So balance, work-life balance, just overall balance, not just work-life, but emotional balance, spiritual, physical, family, financial, and career, all of it. So I don't work on or I pick a day each weekend. It's usually Sunday where I don't work at all. And then I may work a few hours on the other day on the weekend. I spend lots of time with my son and my wife. I'm gonna celebrate our 20-year anniversary next year. So balance is important for sure. And some other stuff, like I learned a lot of lessons early on. I read countless books, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Good to Great,
Oh yeah.
Dale Carnegie, you name it. A lot of personal development, but I made a ton of mistakes. For example, one of the mistakes I made is when I left my first job out of college, AT&T, I didn't have enough saved up. I should have had a lot more money in savings to get me through those lean months when things were tough. And so it was really hard, eating a lot of hot dogs and ramen noodles and PB&J just to get through that time. And I made some bad financial decisions with my company that hurt me in the long run because I needed to pay the bills, to pay the rent, or the mortgage. So that's a big one. I meditate twice a day, every day, to keep the stress level down. Yeah, I kind of imagine a night before I go to bed, I tell my subconscious, hey, let go of everything you don't need and hold on to what you do. And I imagine kind of like an arc of just all the thoughts and the clutter and the junk in my mind going from my mind into the earth. I just tell myself I'm going to give all that stuff back to Mother Earth into the ground. So that's another little tip that helps me.
Thoughts are very powerful. I love it, man. That's great.
Yeah. So first company, telecommunications, and we became the largest distributor of Lucent Technologies and Nextel wireless equipment in Kansas City. My dad and my aunts and uncles were entrepreneurs, so I guess it's kind of in the blood. I had some good mentors there, but really it was the books that I started reading after I had some struggles. I really focused on reading, and to this day I still read a business book I alternate. I do a pleasure or fiction book, and then I alternate, and then I go back to nonfiction. So I'm pretty disciplined with that, and every night before I go to bed I'll read a few chapters.
Well, and I know we usually save it till last, but since you brought up the books, we'll go ahead and ask you my token question. If you were going to hire a CEO to take the reins for your company, what would be the one book that you'd require he or she read before taking over?
Yeah, so it'd be Superpower, and that's really because of the industry we're in. That's a story of Michael Skelly and his team, where Clean Line Energy, trying to develop transmission lines to solve this problem of wind and solar, unlocking all this wind and solar and their struggles. Cool. So yeah, it's pretty specific.
Awesome. So you had mentioned also that self-discipline was one of the main keys to your success. Talk more about that.
Yeah, in studying the lives of successful men and women over the years, people of all kinds, of all races, ethnicity, everything. Self-discipline is really the one trait that successful people have in common, and
Mm,
by that I mean practice, for instance, delayed gratification. There is a temptation, and I've been guilty of it myself over the years, when
mm,
things are going well, either in your job or in a company, and you have, some excess cash coming in,
yeah.
big bonus or whatever, there's a temptation to spend it, right?
Mm, mm,
And so the discipline to set aside 10% of everything you're earning into savings, just as a general rule, but when those pops come in, those financial
mm,
pops, try to set aside at least half of the net amount you have left over after taxes. And for me, that really, really helped, because when I would sell a company in the past or have any kind of a pop like that,
yeah.
I was able to utilize that and flip it into the next thing, right? And those times when you can't pay the mortgage because you're the first one to lose your salary, right? When cash flow is
Right.
tight, you pay
Right.
your team, but you don't pay yourself, right?
Yeah.
As founders, we have to make those sacrifices. So having that nest egg, even if it's only 3 to 6 months of paying your bills, having that set aside helps you make better financial decisions for your company.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it removes that kind of the need for money, the need for to have if you have an empty space, right? Where psychologically need something, we're more likely to make a rash decision that's not really in the best interests of the company. They're just filling a gap.
Exactly. The one other element that I would like to impart with respect to self-discipline is the notion that your workday should be proactive to the extent that it can be rather than reactive. A lot of people go through their day reacting to this text message and this email or this Slack or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So set aside time. I always set aside time to catch up on emails and do the strategic projects that are building the long-term value rather than
Mm,
running around putting out fires. Sometimes you have to do that. You have to put out fires, but it's important to structure that time. And as an entrepreneur, there's been many times, in fact, most of the time when I start a company, I'm working from home.
yeah.
And at home, there can be tons of distractions, right? We all know that. Oh, I really
Absolutely.
want to watch that next episode of whatever on Netflix, or I should probably put in a load of laundry or do this chore or that honeydew or
Right.
whatever.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. So having the discipline to really structure your day, and not just do busy work, but do stuff that actually creates value in the company.
Value. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that. And Stephen Covey, he took one of the chapters of Seven Habits and he pulled it out and wrote a whole book, and it's called First Things First. I don't know
Yeah.
if you read
Great.
it, but yeah. So that was transformative to me. I read that 10 years ago, and that's what he talks about is we can't really manage time, but we can manage our priorities. And he talks about his four quadrants and how CEOs should be 85% of the time in a quad two, which is proactive, right? So I love exactly what you're saying, man.
Great book. Yeah. Highly recommend that one too.
Yeah, very good. Well, hey man, so you've got six exits under your belt. What are some of the big lessons learned, or some of the key takeaways that you've learned from doing that you would, hey, if somebody's considering an exit in the next 1 or 2 years or something, or maybe even further out, what should they be really thinking about?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that I also had a failure. Company number seven, Earthgrid is actually number eight, but prior to Earthgrid, number seven was a failure. And you learn from your successes and your failures. At least we should.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and with the failure, we were ahead of our time. We were ahead of our time, and it was a company that was selling renewable energy and energy efficiency products and services to homes and
Yeah.
small businesses.
Uh-huh.
And it was like more than 10 years ago, and so the margins were way too thin. We were just trying to make something work that we thought was a good idea, but it just didn't work.
Hmm.
Yeah, but with respect to an exit, your question, the temptation to think that, oh, the company is valued too high. I'll give you a specific example. In 2015, my solar company was just going gangbusters. We had about 80 employees at the time, and we were one of the fastest growing kind of community, small utility scale solar companies in the country, with projects in 22 states.
Right.
And we got a little bit too big for our britches, our management team, and that starts with me. With respect to our valuation, we were talking to a very large company that was going to acquire us or make a major investment in us. And we thought they were offering us a valuation of $60 million. And we thought we were worth double that. And we kept pushing back, and a couple of people on the team were aggressively pushing back. And anyway, that was a huge mistake. We should have just said, yes. I mean, because they started at like 45 and they got up to 60. We should have just said yes. And the reason it was a mistake is there was an unforeseen change in the macroeconomic climate. Oil prices crashed. And although we don't use oil to generate electricity in this country outside of Alaska and Hawaii, it has nothing to do with electricity. The value of solar companies that were publicly traded dropped by 40 or 50%. And so the buyer was thinking that we were less valuable, and they were actually a huge solar company. And so they cut their entire M&A team. They fired everybody. So our deal fell apart. And so then we had to rush into a bad deal with a less than optimal investor. So anyway, don't get too proud of your valuation at your own expense.
Got it. Yeah. Any other big takeaways from your exits?
Yeah, I guess another one would be when you do it, take some time for yourself before you jump right into something. I mean, that's probably natural for a lot of people, but I see some folks when they go from one thing, they just jump right into something. Whether it's a consulting gig or whatever, or sitting on boards. Yeah, take some time to kind of reflect on what you did well and the mistakes you made in the previous journey.
Wow, very cool. Awesome stuff there. Yeah, man. So, wow, just looking back, I took some notes here over some of the things we've covered, and just some awesome stuff. I'd like to take a few minutes and just kind of summarize. One is some of the keys to your success is getting physically fit. And what you found is by doing that, the amount of energy that you've had has allowed you to really spurred your kind of journey down really balanced, not just in physically, but you've also taken a balance or jump into emotional balance, spiritual, physical, family, and financial. So really balancing it all out has been a real key to your success. Has given you more energy. You meditate every day. And I love that concept that because our thoughts drive our feelings and emotions, and our feelings and emotions drive our actions. And you are being very intentional at the end of the day of literally like picturing the stuff that's garbage and throwing it out into a garbage can. I think that's phenomenal. It's the first time I've heard anything like that. Another one is self-discipline, the one trait that the most successful people have in common, and the avoidance of that. Basically delayed gratification. Avoid the temptation to spend right away. Always putting 10% aside, but then if you do get a big win after taxes, put half of it away. I think that's fantastic. And this concept of proactive versus reactive. And I have to agree, the business owners that are able to create an environment in their company and for themselves where they're proactive versus reactive, they're able to focus on long-term projects and move the company forward. Yeah, and then you had some great keys on exits. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, well said, Patrick.
Yeah, very cool, man. So, hey, if there was one takeaway that you would really want the audience to absorb from our time together today, what would that be?
Yeah, the only thing that I didn't touch on is have fun. Life's too short to work with assholes or jerks or whatever. So, have a sense of humor about yourself. Don't be afraid to admit your limitations. I'm just kind of randomly saying a few things here, but yeah, for sure, have fun with whatever it is you're doing in life. Because if you don't have fun, if you don't feel the power of purpose for what you're doing, it's going to be hard to have that discipline and get up in the morning and work really, really hard as a, as a CEO of any company, large or small.
Yeah, makes sense. Hey, Troy, again, thanks for having me on the show. If any of our listeners want to reach out, perhaps somebody listened that wants to become an investor, or anybody wants to get a hold of you for any follow-up questions from today, how could they do that?
You bet. So you can follow me on social media. Solar Ninja Troy is my handle.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Or if someone wants to send me an email, I'll just give that out. It's troy@earthgrid.io for input output.
Very good. Cool, man. Well, hey, thank you again for being on the show, Troy. Great to have you. For the listeners out there, please hit like and subscribe and help us spread the word about what we're doing. We're helping the next generation of leaders and CEOs do that much better in their companies. With that, we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Patrick.